Quantity control. The government sometimes intervenes in a market by imposing a quota. A quota is only going to be effective, it's only going to be binding if it's at something less than the equilibrium quantity. So for this particular market, at a price of $45, the equilibrium quantity was 300. In order to be limiting, our quota has to be something less than 300. So the nice and kind of easy part of this is, let's say the quota is at 200, then the line is either already going to be drawn on a graph at 200 for you, or all you do is draw a vertical line at that quantity of 200, and it's going to create the wedge that we had to draw in whenever we used a price control like a ceiling or floor, is automatically created by the quota itself. So we know now that the name of that line at 200 that separates supply and demand, that is going to be our deadweight loss, rather than the equilibrium quantity, a number of transactions equal to 300. We only get 200 in light of the quota. That line then means that we also have what we call, that line has another name besides just the wedge this time. It also is going to be what we call or know to be the quota rent. So we'll come back to that in just a second. But given this quota at 200, I can see that the demand price off of our demand curve, if you follow the line, the quota up to the demand curve, you can see that that demand price is $60. So that is the price that consumers pay in order to buy whatever good this happens to be. So that that area that we call consumer surplus, again abbreviated CS, is going to be the area that is above the price they're paying, $60, but below the demand curve. All of that area now has been shaded in blue. Now on the other end of our quota here at 200, we have the supply price, and at 200 it looks that that supply price is slightly slightly below. Maybe it's like $34. So $34 is the amount that the sellers get to keep, the amount that they have. So the amount that sellers get and the area above the supply curve up to that price that they're keeping represents producer surplus. So you look at this and you go, well, wait a minute, there's the big block of stuff there where there's nothing shaded. You know, it's not part of consumer surplus, it's not part of producer surplus. Well, what is that? That area, which is again about, looks like to be at about $34, and then up along the quota rent or wedge line there, and now I've outlined that area in green. I'm going to shade that. So what that money represents is that the government has either leased or rented some kind of a license, some amount of quota, whether it's taxis in a large city, whether it's the amount of some fresh or saltwater resource like Alaskan king crab or clams, a certain quantity of those have been made available, and the operators willing to produce and sell that had to bid, rent, lease, the ability to provide those. Again, that's why quota rent is there. The quota rent is the difference between the $34 that those operators get to keep and the $60 that consumers are actually paying. So, 60 minus 34 would be $16. So for every $60 purchased by consumers, $34 goes into the pockets of the operators. The remaining $16 represents what those operators had to pay in order for the right to sell in this market. So generally that money then is paid to the government or transferred to the government in payment for the operator's ability to supply this market. And if you would multiply that quota rent of $16, the distance along our axis here between the price consumers are paying and the operators or producers, sellers get to keep, times the number of transactions that actually happen, then you're getting the area of this rectangle that I've shaded green, and that would represent the total amount that is raised through this quota rent, this quota rental situation. But the end story is total surplus, the area of consumer plus producer surplus clearly is less, so there's been an effect on efficiency. The area of dead weight loss, the number of transactions, rather than 300 units being exchanged, only 200, and so any and all of the surpluses associated with those 100 or so transactions are forfeited. So the quota might achieve some desired end, but it comes at a price, and that price is a loss of market efficiency. Okay, good luck with everything. See you soon.